When we think of courage, we often imagine the battlefield, the stage, or the boardroom. We picture men and women facing great dangers, taking massive risks, or standing alone against opposition. Yet, one of the most overlooked and profound demonstrations of courage is much quieter, much more personal. It is the decision to rise each day and choose happiness when your circumstances seem designed to rob you of it. To smile when the world expects you to frown, to keep your spirit alive when life tries to bury it. This, too, is courage, and in many ways it is the highest form of courage because it is fought not against enemies outside of you, but against the enemies inside. Think about it. Anyone can be happy when the sky is clear, when the account is full, when the applause is loud. That takes no effort. That requires no discipline. But to remain hopeful when the doors are closed, to hold on to optimism when the news is discouraging, to choose gratitude when your resources are limited, that is the kind of strength most people underestimate. Because happiness under pressure is not a reflex, it is a decision. And like every decision, it calls for courage. There is a deep psychology at play here. Human beings are wired for survival. Our instincts are tuned to notice threats, to dwell on problems, to magnify pain. This is why so many people live their lives dominated by worry, anger, or despair. They are living in the default setting of the mind. But happiness demands that we override that default. It requires that we tell ourselves, yes, I see the problem, I feel the weight, but I refuse to surrender my spirit to it. And the moment you make that declaration, you are engaging in an act of courage far greater than most will ever recognize. The world often confuses happiness with passivity. They imagine that to be happy in the midst of hardship is to ignore reality or to pretend the difficulties do not exist. But that is not happiness. That is denial. True happiness is not ignorance of life's challenges. It is defiance in the face of them. It is the bold proclamation that no matter what life takes from me, it cannot take my ability to choose my inner state. That choice is my freedom. That choice is my weapon. And to wield it requires the same courage as any soldier stepping into battle. Ask yourself, how many people do you know who live at the mercy of their circumstances? Their moods rise and fall with the market, with the weather, with the opinions of others. They are prisoners of external events. But the courageous are different. They understand that if happiness can be taken away by events, then it was never true happiness to begin with. The real thing is untouchable. It is a fortress you build within yourself, brick by brick, through daily decisions. And every time you choose to smile through difficulty, every time you hold on to peace in chaos, you are laying another stone in that fortress. Philosophers and spiritual teachers across history have agreed on this principle. They may have used different words, but the message is the same. You cannot control life, but you can control the meaning you give to life, and meaning shapes happiness. Courage is required to look at pain and say, this will not define me. This will refine me. Courage is required to look at loss and say, I will not let this destroy my joy. I will let it teach me to treasure what I still have. These choices are not easy, they stretch the soul. But they make happiness possible in the darkest hours. And here is a paradox worth noticing. The very moments when happiness seems most impossible are the moments when it is most powerful. A laugh in the sunshine is pleasant, but a laugh in the storm is divine. It awakens something in you. It proves to you that your spirit is bigger than your circumstances. That is why choosing happiness during hardship does more than uplift your mood. It transforms your identity. You no longer see yourself as a victim of life, but as a master of yourself. That is a shift only courage can create. You must decide then whether you will live as most people do, waiting for life to give you a reason to be happy, or whether you will live with the courage to give life your reason. Waiting will enslave you. Choosing will free you. And that freedom is not theoretical, it is real, practical, lived every single day. So, the next time your heart feels heavy, the next time your plans collapse, the next time life tempts you to despair, remember this: happiness is not a luxury reserved for the fortunate. It is an act of courage available to you right now. It is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about standing up in the storm and declaring, I will not let this storm decide the state of my soul. And when you make that choice, not once, not twice, but consistently, you will discover that happiness is not a fleeting emotion. It is a discipline, a habit of courage, and a way of life. Closing thought. To be happy when life is easy is ordinary. To be happy when life is hard is extraordinary. And the extraordinary path is always reserved for the courageous. One of the greatest traps that steals happiness from people is the illusion of control. We imagine that if we could only manage every detail of life, if we could get people to act exactly as we want, if we could bend circumstances to our design, then we would finally feel at peace. But the truth is, most of what happens in this world lies completely beyond our reach. No amount of worry, no level of manipulation, no sleepless night of planning can prevent storms from coming, people from disappointing us, or life from shifting in ways we never anticipated. And this is where so many people lose themselves. They pour their energy into what cannot be controlled, and in doing so, they hand their happiness over to forces outside of themselves. Think for a moment about how much of your inner unrest comes not from what is happening, but from your resistance to what you cannot change. A friend betrays you, and instead of moving forward, you replay the memory 1,000 times, trying to rewrite it in your mind. A financial setback comes, and instead of adjusting, you dwell on the unfairness of it. The weather ruins your plans, and you curse the sky as though the clouds had conspired against you. These are battles you cannot win because they were never yours to fight. And the more you struggle to control what lies outside of you, the more powerless and frustrated you become. But here is the liberating truth. You don't need control over everything to be happy. You only need control over one thing: yourself, your thoughts, your choices, your responses. That is the domain where your power lies. And once you stop wasting energy trying to manage what you cannot, you discover a new strength in focusing on what you can. The moment you take responsibility for your own mind, your own attitude, your own perspective, you reclaim your freedom. Psychology teaches us that our suffering often comes not from events themselves, but from the meaning we attach to them. You cannot always decide what happens to you, but you can always decide what story you tell yourself about it. This is where your control lies. Two people can face the same setback. One sees it as the end of the road. The other sees it as a lesson or a redirection. The event is the same, but the meaning is entirely different. And it is that meaning, chosen by the mind, that determines whether happiness survives. The wisest among us understand this distinction. They do not waste precious energy raging at the immovable walls of life. Instead, they focus on the door that is open, the choice that is available, the perspective that empowers. They ask themselves, what can I do right now with what I have, where I am? And by acting on what is possible, instead of despairing over what is not, they build momentum, they move forward. They remain happy, not because life is perfect, but because they refuse to fight battles already lost. And there is something deeply philosophical about this truth. To release what you cannot control is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the humility to accept that you are not the master of the universe, but you are the master of yourself. It is the courage to let go, not in defeat, but in dignity. You free your hands from gripping what cannot be held, so that you can use them to shape what is within reach. And in this shift, you find peace. Imagine how different your life would feel if you could instantly separate the controllable from the uncontrollable. Every time a difficulty arose, you would pause and ask, can I change this? If yes, I will act with all my strength. If no, I will release it and focus on my own state of being. Do you realize how much mental energy this would save? Do you see how much stress it would dissolve? Most of the unhappiness in people's lives comes not from reality itself, but from the refusal to accept reality. Acceptance is not surrender. It is strategy. It positions you to act with clarity instead of drowning in resistance. And here is the paradox. The more you release what you cannot control, the more power you feel, because suddenly you are no longer at the mercy of external forces. You are anchored in yourself. Life becomes less about reacting and more about choosing, less about fear and more about freedom. You become untouchable, not because the storms stop coming, but because you have learned how to stand in the storm without letting it rule your heart. So, remember this: your happiness does not depend on bending the world to your will. It depends on mastering the art of focus, placing your energy only where it counts, only where your influence is real. Everything else must be released. Closing thought. The key to lasting happiness is not controlling life, but controlling yourself. Once you learn to release what is beyond you and master what is within you, you discover a power far greater than control. You discover peace. There is a truth about happiness that many people overlook, and it is this: happiness does not begin with abundance, achievement, or applause. It begins with gratitude. Gratitude is not a luxury reserved for those who have everything. It is a discipline practiced by those who choose to see value in what they already have. And this is why gratitude is so powerful. It transforms the lens through which you experience life. The same circumstance that makes one person bitter can make another person stronger, depending entirely on whether gratitude is present. Think about the human tendency. We are always looking forward, chasing the next accomplishment, the next possession, the next recognition. This endless pursuit creates a cycle of dissatisfaction because no matter what we achieve, the mind quickly moves the goalpost. What once seemed like a dream fulfilled now feels ordinary, and the hunger begins again. Gratitude interrupts that cycle. It teaches us to pause, to notice, to appreciate. It tells us what you have right now is enough. And when the mind accepts this truth, happiness is no longer something postponed to a future event. It is something lived in the present. Gratitude also reshapes how we respond to difficulty. Hardship without gratitude feels like punishment. Hardship with gratitude becomes preparation. When life tests you, gratitude allows you to see the lesson hidden inside the struggle. Instead of asking, "Why me?" gratitude asks, "What can this teach me? How can this shape me?" And in that shift of questioning, pain is transformed into purpose. This is not to deny suffering, it is to give suffering meaning. And once pain is given meaning, it no longer has the power to destroy happiness. There is a deep psychological foundation for this truth. Modern research confirms what ancient wisdom has always taught: gratitude literally rewires the brain. It strengthens neural pathways that elevate mood, reduce anxiety, and create resilience. But beyond science, there is philosophy. Gratitude forces us to confront a profound question: what is the measure of wealth? If wealth is only measured in possessions or status, then many will live impoverished lives. But if wealth is measured by appreciation for life itself, the breath in your lungs, the strength in your body, the love of those around you, then you already stand in abundance. Gratitude shifts your definition of wealth, and in doing so, it unlocks happiness regardless of circumstance. Consider for a moment the people who have the least yet radiate the most joy. You see them in places where life is simple, where luxuries are few but smiles are genuine and laughter is frequent. Why? Because their happiness is not built on comparison or consumption. It is built on gratitude. They find joy in what many of us overlook: a shared meal, a moment of rest, the beauty of a sunrise. Gratitude sharpens the senses to the gifts that are already present. Gifts that those blinded by dissatisfaction fail to notice. And gratitude is not passive, it is active, it must be practiced. Left to itself, the human mind drifts toward complaint, toward envy, toward longing. Gratitude must be summoned deliberately, like a muscle that grows stronger only when exercised. This is why daily practices matter. Writing down what you are thankful for, speaking words of appreciation, pausing in the middle of stress to identify even the smallest blessings. These simple actions recondition the mind, training it to see light even in the shadows. And over time, gratitude becomes the natural response, no longer forced, but instinctive. There is also a spiritual depth to gratitude. When you live with gratitude, you acknowledge that life itself is a gift, that you are not entitled to every breath, every opportunity, every sunrise. Gratitude humbles you, reminds you of your dependence, and keeps you from the arrogance of believing you are self-made. In humility, gratitude grows. And where gratitude grows, happiness follows. Think about this carefully. Without gratitude, even abundance feels like poverty. With gratitude, even scarcity feels like wealth. This is why gratitude is not just a tool. It is a transformation of perspective. It is the alchemy that turns ordinary moments into extraordinary ones, and it is the shield that guards your happiness against the assaults of disappointment. So ask yourself, how often do you pause to notice what you have? How often do you allow yourself to feel the richness of life as it is, rather than longing for what it is not? Gratitude is not about lowering your ambition. It is about raising your awareness. It does not tell you to stop striving for more. It tells you to stop overlooking what is already here. It teaches you to be happy on the way, not only when you arrive. And here is the challenge: the next time life tests you, do not ask, "What have I lost?" Ask instead, "What remains? What can I learn? What can I still give thanks for?" That shift in perspective will not erase the hardship, but it will keep the hardship from erasing your happiness. Closing thought. Happiness is not created by waiting for perfect conditions. It is created by gratitude that transforms whatever condition you are in. The person who learns to give thanks in all things discovers a happiness that cannot be stolen, because it does not depend on what changes. It depends on how you choose to see. Happiness is often misunderstood as something spontaneous, something that appears out of nowhere when the right conditions align. But happiness is not an accident. It is not a sudden gift that life hands you when fortune smiles your way. Happiness is built carefully, intentionally, through the habits and rituals you practice every single day. The same way you strengthen a muscle by repeated use, or the same way you sharpen your mind by consistent study, you build happiness by shaping your daily life around practices that nourish your spirit. The truth is, life will always be unpredictable. There will be chaos, interruptions, and demands outside of your control. But rituals are the anchor that keep you steady in the storm. They are the small, deliberate actions that remind you who you are and what you value, regardless of what the day brings. And it is in those repeated acts, those seemingly simple routines, that happiness begins to take root. Consider the power of starting your day with intention. Many people wake up and immediately hand their mind over to the world, the phone, the news, the flood of other people's demands. From the very first moments, they lose control of their mental state. But those who understand the power of ritual use those first moments differently. They pause, they reflect, they affirm. They choose words, thoughts, or practices that set the tone for the day ahead. That small act is not trivial, it is foundational, because the mind, like clay, hardens into the shape it is given early. If you begin with gratitude, with clarity, with focus, the rest of the day bends in alignment with that choice. Rituals need not be grand to be powerful. 10 minutes of silence, a page of reflection, a list of goals, a walk in nature, these are not luxuries, they are investments. Each one is a brick laid in the construction of a strong inner life. Without them, happiness becomes fragile, dependent on outside events. With them, happiness becomes durable, because it is reinforced daily by the choices you make. Psychology has long shown us that habits shape identity. The things you do consistently are not just things you do, they become who you are. A person who practices daily gratitude does not just feel thankful. They become a grateful person. Someone who writes affirmations daily does not just speak confidence. They become confident. Identity is sculpted by repetition. And happiness, like all qualities of the inner life, must be rehearsed until it becomes second nature. Think also about the cumulative power of rituals. A single workout will not transform your health. A single affirmation will not rewire your thinking, but performed daily over weeks, months, and years, these rituals create compounding returns. Happiness grows like interest. It multiplies when invested consistently. Yet, most people underestimate the small things. They wait for large breakthroughs, forgetting that it is the ordinary disciplines that prepare you for extraordinary results. The happiest people are rarely those who stumbled into joy by chance. They are those who built it brick by brick through daily practices. And there is a philosophical truth hidden here. Rituals remind us that happiness is not something to be chased in the future, but something to be cultivated in the present. They shift the focus from longing to living. When you engage in a ritual, you are not waiting for happiness. You are practicing it. You are telling yourself, I will not postpone joy until conditions are perfect. I will create conditions here and now that support joy. This mindset transforms happiness from a distant destination into a lived reality. But rituals require discipline. They require the willingness to repeat, even when the mood is not there, even when the results are not immediate. And this is where many people fail. They confuse motivation with discipline. Motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls. Discipline is steady. It acts regardless of feeling. The disciplined individual who repeats their rituals daily builds an inner structure so strong that even when life shakes, happiness does not collapse. So ask yourself, what rituals shape your days? Are they rituals of distraction or rituals of development? Do you feed your mind with negativity each morning, or do you strengthen it with truth? Do you allow chaos to dictate your schedule, or do you claim time for practices that ground you? Your answers will reveal why happiness feels fleeting or why it feels firm. Because happiness is never an accident. It is always the byproduct of consistent inner work. The most powerful truth is this: Happiness is not found in the extraordinary moments of life, but in the ordinary habits repeated daily. It is not the one-time achievement, but the repeated discipline. It is not waiting for life to hand you joy, but designing your life in a way that cultivates joy every single day. Closing thought. Do not wait for happiness to arrive as a guest. You must build it as a home. And the home of happiness is built not in a single act, but in the daily rituals that strengthen your spirit and steady your mind. Create those rituals and happiness will cease to be fleeting. It will become your foundation. There is a law of life that few people truly understand until they experience it. The quickest way to rise above your own pain is to help someone else carry theirs. Service has a mysterious power. It lifts not only the person you touch, but also yourself. While most people chase happiness by looking inward, obsessing over their own needs, problems, and ambitions, the paradox is that joy often reveals itself when you look outward. In serving others, you expand your world beyond your own suffering. You remember that life is not just about you, and that shift in perspective is often enough to breathe new life into a weary soul. Think about the times when you felt most alive. Chances are, it was not only in moments of personal gain, but in moments of giving. When you encouraged a friend who was struggling, when you helped a stranger without expecting recognition, when you gave of yourself to someone in need, you felt a surge of meaning that no amount of possessions could match. That is because service awakens a deeper truth. We are not designed only to take, but to contribute. We are not fulfilled by accumulation alone, we are fulfilled by impact. Psychology supports this truth. Studies repeatedly show that people who live lives of service, whether through volunteering, mentoring, or simple daily acts of kindness, report higher levels of happiness, lower levels of stress, and a greater sense of purpose. Why? Because service shifts the mind from self-absorption to significance. When you serve, you step outside the prison of your own worries and realize that your struggles are not the entire universe. You see others, and in lifting them, you lift yourself. But the power of service goes even deeper than psychology. It is spiritual. When you give, you align yourself with a universal law. Life rewards contribution. The world does not remember those who only consumed. It remembers those who added value. And service does not need to be grand to matter. It can be as simple as listening when someone feels unheard, speaking kindness when someone expects judgment, or giving encouragement when someone has lost their hope. These small acts create ripples, and those ripples extend farther than you can imagine. Service also transforms how you view your own hardship. When you dedicate yourself to helping others, your pain begins to serve a purpose. You realize that what you endured can be used to guide someone else through their trial. The very struggles that once seemed meaningless become the credentials that allow you to inspire, to comfort, to lead. Without service, pain isolates you. With service, pain connects you. This is why so many of the most compassionate people are those who have suffered deeply. They have turned their wounds into wisdom and their wisdom into service. And yet, many resist this idea. They believe that service requires wealth, status, or influence. But this is a misconception. Service does not wait until you have more. It begins with what you have now. If you cannot give money, you can give time. If you cannot give time, you can give words. If you cannot give words, you can give presence. Everyone has something to offer, and often, the simplest gifts have the greatest impact. There is also a profound connection between service and gratitude. When you serve others, you become more aware of your own blessings. Helping someone in need reminds you of what you still possess. Standing beside someone in their suffering puts your own struggles in perspective. Gratitude grows in the soil of service, and gratitude, as we have already seen, is the foundation of happiness. But perhaps the greatest gift of service is that it creates meaning. Happiness without meaning is shallow. It fades quickly. But when you know that your life matters, that your existence is making a difference in the lives of others, joy takes root at a deeper level. Meaning sustains happiness when pleasure fades, when circumstances shift, when life becomes difficult. And meaning is born through contribution. So if happiness feels distant, if joy seems fragile, ask yourself not, what can I get? But rather, what can I give? That single shift will change the entire direction of your life. Because happiness is not only found in achievements or possessions, it is found in knowing that you have made the world, even in a small way, better because you lived. Closing thought. The pursuit of happiness ends not in taking more, but in giving more. Service unlocks a joy that nothing else can provide, because in lifting others, you rise. If you want happiness that endures, stop asking how life can serve you and start asking how you can serve life. One of the greatest mistakes people make in their pursuit of happiness is the assumption that it is something to be hunted down, captured, and held like a prize. They believe happiness exists somewhere out there, hidden in the next achievement, the next possession, the next relationship, or the next milestone. So they chase endlessly, like a runner pursuing the horizon. And just when they think they have reached it, the horizon moves farther away. This is the tragedy of those who spend their entire lives chasing happiness. It forever escapes them because they are looking in the wrong direction. Happiness cannot be chased because it is not external. It cannot be given to you by circumstances, and it cannot be stolen from you by circumstances. Happiness is internal. It is not something you pursue, it is something you decide. And the moment you understand this, you stop running. You stop waiting. You stop living for tomorrow and begin living in the only place happiness has ever existed, the present. Consider the psychology of the chaser. They say, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I have more money, when I meet the right person, when the world finally recognizes my worth. But every when is a moving target. Even when they achieve it, the mind quickly demands another condition before happiness is allowed. In this way, happiness is postponed endlessly, always just one step ahead of where they stand. The chaser lives in permanent dissatisfaction, not because they lack, but because they believe happiness must be earned by something outside of themselves. Now contrast that with the chooser. The chooser says, I will be happy now. Not because everything is perfect, but because perfection is not required. They understand that happiness is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of perspective. They see value in small blessings, meaning in daily rituals, and joy in service. They refuse to wait for life to make them happy. They choose to be happy, and in doing so, bring joy into everything they touch. While the chaser runs, the chooser rests. While the chaser postpones, the chooser lives. This distinction is both psychological and philosophical. Psychologically, the one who chooses happiness reclaims their autonomy. They no longer outsource their emotional state to the opinions of others or the fluctuations of fortune. They become self-governing, independent of external validation. Philosophically, the chooser understands that life is not promised beyond this moment. To wait for future conditions to align before embracing joy is to gamble with time you may never have. The wise therefore choose happiness now, recognizing that the present moment is all that is real, and it is too precious to waste in delay. And here is a paradox worth reflecting on. The people who stop chasing happiness and begin choosing it are often the ones who end up experiencing more of it. Why? Because they no longer live in scarcity. They no longer say, I need more before I can be happy. They say, I am already enough, I already have enough, I already see enough. That mindset of sufficiency allows them to enjoy life as it is, and in that enjoyment, more opportunities for joy seem to unfold naturally. Happiness attracts more happiness when it is chosen, not when it is pursued. We must also acknowledge that choosing happiness requires discipline. It is not always easy to decide joy in the middle of hardship. It demands the courage we spoke of earlier, the clarity to release what you cannot control, the gratitude to see blessings in all conditions, the daily rituals to ground you, and the willingness to serve others. Happiness as a choice is not a shallow denial of reality. It is the culmination of all these practices working together. It is a higher way of living, one that refuses to be dictated by circumstance. Ask yourself honestly, have you been chasing happiness? Have you told yourself that you'll allow joy only after some condition is met? If so, it is time to stop running. Because the moment you stop chasing and start choosing, you will realize that happiness was never far away. It was always within you, waiting for permission to rise. That permission can only come from you. So do not let your life become a restless pursuit of something that is already yours. Do not waste your days waiting for external signs to allow you to enjoy the gift of existence. The power is already in your hands, the choice already available. You can decide here and now that happiness belongs to you, not because life is perfect, but because you are willing to embrace it even when it isn't. Closing thought. Happiness is not the prize at the end of the race. It is the choice to run with joy right now. Stop chasing what you already have and start choosing it. For the day you decide happiness is yours, no one and nothing can take it away.